Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. People who worked in restaurants, what was the worst customer that you had to deal with? Way back in the 80s I worked in a restaurant that was a favorite of a celebrity chef of those days, Jeff Smith, the frugal gourmet. Never seen a bigger asshat than that guy. Literally make our servers cry. Nothing was ever right. He was beyond rude and condescending, yet he kept coming back. He had a reputation of being a jerk off camera. Eventually he was disgraced by being outed as a child predator and was quickly forgotten by all. Our restaurant was a good place. Another celebrity chef of the time, Graham Kerr, the galloping gourmet, was always a pleasure to have visit. A homeless guy who came in, actively dripping of blood from his hands, and started screaming at me and threatening me because I wouldn't give him a bakery case item without him paying. He was dripping blood all over the counter and spitting everywhere until I threatened to call the cops. A huge group of clearly rich kids who came in, stole a bunch of drinks, and left the dining room trashed. A guy who demanded I take money from our tip jar to help him pay for his order and argued with me when I said no. People who would place large orders or even take home a cake and eat half of it, then flip their shit and demand a refund when they'd find out it was all vegan, even though that fact was well advertised. I worked at Friendly's in high school as a server and this brings back so many painful memories. Worked my ass off all night once for a whole soccer team and parents who came in with no notice. Then at the end of the night they wanted everything split up. The kids were sitting at different tables, so trying to get the right kid's food to the right parent was near impossible. Not to mention some kids split meals or got specialty drinks and ice cream or appetizers. Some parents were trying to tell me what their kid ordered. Others were just saying whatever the blonde kid with the headband ordered, etc. It was impossible to work how got what and who was supposed to be charged with it. Not to mention about half of them had coupons that they were all switching around with each other, some of which were expired, but they wanted used anyway because they were spending so much money. A huge portion of the bill had to be comped because no one would claim a bunch of items and I didn't think to tell them beforehand they couldn't split the bill 17 ways. After reprinting checks about 10 times, because God forbid someone pay an extra $2 on a milkshake they said their kid didn't order, even though you could look over at the table and see half the kids had milkshakes. I was in the back crying. My manager was yelling at me over what a fiasco this was, and mad because the kids had been drawing on the tables and throwing crayons at other customers over the partition. I finally come back out to hopefully get everyone change or swipe cards or whatever, and one of the dads had the audacity to tell me to not look so stressed out, it's just Friendly's, fuck you whoever that guy was. They then left me about a $15 tip in total for the 3 hours I waited on them with a bill that was easily over $400. A lot of them tipped on the coupon price instead of the actual cost, and a lot of them just left whatever change was left over. I know it's only Friendly's, and I might have been young, but that doesn't make the job any easier. Fuck those people. After a wedding reception ended at our facility we were cleaning, and I began the cleaning process on our espresso machine. The party was over almost a half hour already. The process takes 12 minutes. People were still there as the party slowly let out, and the father of the bride asks me for an espresso. I told him I could get it to him, as we have a strict policy of always trying to satisfy our guests' needs, but the machine was cleaning, and it would be done in about 10 minutes. He begins ranting about how much he paid for the wedding and stormed to our banquets manager and told them I refused to make it for him. Manager is at bag and starts ripping me in front of the guy. I show both of them that the machine is just finishing the cleaning process and it was impossible to make it beforehand. I got suspended for 2 weeks. I worked at a bakery for 2 years and I had to deal with honestly the most heinous and rude customers ever. I've worked in the food service industry my whole life and lived in Toronto up until 3 years ago, and I have never dealt with such entitlement. Anyways, one day one of our staff members quit by text message 5 minutes before her shift and 30 minutes before we were set to open at 8 AM on a Saturday. We were hard pressed finding someone to cover, so I was alone until a front of house person was able to come in. About an hour later, I had one of the kitchen staff helping me, and all they could do was grab things and bag them as they weren't trained on cash or coffee. So here I'm running around trying to help customers, make coffees, ring people through, and clearly stressed. This Deutsche Bag man was clearly annoyed that he had to wait, huffing and puffing, and eventually loudly exclaimed, "Fuck this, I'm not fucking waiting for this shit," and proceeded to throw his bagged muffin at my head and storm out. I legit almost chased him down. I was livid. Customers are shit lol. Had a man and his wife come in during a really busy lunch rush. He was rude off the bat, interrupting me, not wanting to listen to me speak, whatever, it happens all the time. He was very adamant that he wanted both chips and salsa and a plate of roasted wings as appetizers. He kept emphasizing that he wanted them together before they ordered their lunch. Even though chips and salsa only take a minute and wings take about 12, I rang them in together because of how he ordered them. In hindsight, I should have made completely sure, but not 3 minutes later, the man is waving at my coworker across the restaurant, yelling at her about how they've been there for 30 minutes and his appetizer is taking too long, and he wants it before his wings. I was at a party table, so she ran back and grabbed the chips and the wings, which were somehow up as well, and brought them out. He took one bite of a wing and tossed the plate like a frisbee across the table towards her and started complaining about them being cold. I rush over to see what's going on, and he starts yelling at me, saying his food is awful and this is the worst service he's ever gotten in his life. I don't do well with grown men yelling at me, so I went to the kitchen and my manager went out and thankfully had my back as much as he could and made the guy pay for the wings and the chips and then leave. After he left, I started to clean the table, where I found the single penny he tipped me with, that my coworker promptly threw in the trash, and got a call from my general manager asking why a man had called me professionally challenged on Yelp. I used to manage a restaurant, and hated those couple of times in 5 years of my working there when some entitled customers left without paying, because the waitresses didn't come to pick up my money. That's a piece of shit move, and a poor excuse, when all you need is to grab a waitress's attention by simply talking. Once it was a family of 4 who left the restaurant during a busy evening and we realized that the bill wasn't paid after some 10 minutes had passed. I checked the cameras and saw the father taking the bill, putting the money in, sitting there for just 3 to 4 minutes, looking around and taking the money back, and leaving with the whole family. Lucky our owner was a great guy and told me to simply ban the fucker and his family. And to my surprise, that piece of shit came back with friends on a busy evening in a couple of months. I was very excited watching his face being embarrassed in front of his friends and customers sitting outside when I told him that he is banned, and when his wife started to get upset I told them I remembered them and told them the whole story with me checking the cameras and seeing him taking the money back and all. A customer ordered one of our daily specials and didn't like it, so instead of complaining to me about the food and letting me offer something else, she complained to my manager about me. This was May of last year. In August of last year, turns out she was one of my college professors for the semester, teaching a management course. She recognized me the first day, but I played it off like I didn't know her. Edit. She did not complain about me to my manager in front of me. I left to go work an event in a different building, and she left a sticky note for me after talking to my boss. I don't know what the sticky note said, since I didn't bother to read it. I worked at a Vietnamese restaurant back in high school, and I had a Viet family come in to eat. They gave me snobby vibe the entire time, especially after I told them I couldn't speak Vietnamese. They ordered regular pho, but asked for no cilantro, so I rang the order in with no cilantro. It came out with cilantro in it, and I told the kitchen what the family asked. The kitchen told me they couldn't do anything about it, so I told my manager, and they told me to ask the family if they still wanted it. Family said yes, so I brought it out, and they took out the cilantro and ate the entire thing. At the end of the meal they spoke to the owner and complained how I got their order completely wrong. got the food for free, and got their bill taken out of my pay. The owner told me I should remove the cilantro myself. Shitty management, shitty customer. Edit. I was not angry that the customer ordered no cilantro. I was upset at the fact that they abused their rights by asking not to pay for their food when they clearly ate everything. Also, it's been a few years, haha. I waited tables for a few years in college, and the worst table that I ever had was a Catholic priest and some guy he was trying to hit up for donations. The whole meal he was very condescending and demanding. After everything was done, I left the check at the table. He ended up walking out stiffing me, not just on the tip, but on the entire check. He even stole the leather check holder thing. I reported this to my manager. A couple weeks later, this same guy comes in with about 20 members of his congregation. My manager told him he wasn't welcome in our restaurant after walking out on his previous tab in front of his whole party. They all ended up leaving to go elsewhere. Best manager I've ever had. Worked fast food in high school. I've got a few. 1. Man orders double cheeseburger with extra cheese and receives one with 4 slices instead of the usual 2. 2 minutes later, he is absolutely red in the face and screaming at the poor cashier. He's demanding to talk to the little shit that made his sandwich and asking if we think this is some kind of joke. Apparently, when he ordered extra cheese he wanted 1 extra slice, not 2. 2. Some guy comes to the drive-thru and orders 4 fish sandwiches. We only had 2 pieces of fish cooked, and they were really close to their whole expiration time. Since we had to cook more anyway, my manager said to waste those 2, since they were old, and make all fresh ones for the customer. Guy comes up to the window and they ask him to pull forward, because it'll be a couple minutes. Meanwhile, we keep serving other cars. After a couple orders go out, this dude is in the lobby and asking for a manager. He is irate that we made him wait on his food while serving other people. The manager apologizes and explains the situation. Most people would be thrilled we didn't serve them old food, but for some reason, that just made this guy angrier. He starts yelling louder and then threatens my manager with physical violence over it. She asks him to leave and threatens to call the police. Dude storms out, slamming the door so hard he broke the latch, and squeals his tires as he leaves the parking lot without his order. Never came back for it either. 3. We had this regular who came in every Sunday morning and ordered the same thing, a side salad, supersize fries, and a Happy Meal for her grandkid. One day, the person who bagged her order put the salad and the fries in the same bag as we were trained to do. If you've never seen a supersize fry container, they're tall, and the side salad is in one of those little rectangular plastic things. So as you can imagine, the fries fell over. For a normal person this is no big deal, but not for this lady. She needed new fries and a new salad, in separate bags this time. Of course the fries we had already made that came up 1 minute ago were not good enough, and she refused to leave or accept the new ones until we made a fresh basket. Pizza, ice cream, sandwich shop in a small rural town. I was on delivery. We had this guy who ordered maybe once a week or so. This customer lived a solid half an hour outside town. None of us knew why the owner ever agreed to deliver to this guy in the first place, being that far out, but we used to wonder if the owner was being threatened into it. The level of shit the customer would raise if you didn't bring him cheese and peppers for his pizza was absolute madness. There was an incident where a delivery driver found the customer waiting on his porch polishing a shotgun, and the first thing the customer did was loosely point the gun towards the driver and say, "Did you bring my cheese and peppers?" We fully believe the customer would have shot our driver if the answer had been no. As it was, the driver didn't have as much cheese and peppers as the customer would have liked. Customer called the restaurant, threw a fit. From then on, when we delivered to this customer, because the owner didn't cut him off, we were told to take a bucket of cheese and peppers with us. I'm talking like one of those bulk ice cream buckets you buy at the supermarket. We all kept on in our trucks, but we had to start taking an extra, just for this one customer. I wonder if the guy was even in it for the pizza. Used to be a bartender at this hybrid restaurant slash bar slash movie theater. On big movie releases, the bar would get absolutely slammed, and on this particular night we had run out of glassware completely. People were allowed to take their drinks into the theater with them. The only glassware I had at the time were regular pint glasses that you would normally serve water in. We only served beer in them in a pinch. This guy and his wife/GF got lucky and caught a seat at the bar, and he ordered a Jack Daniel's neat. Having no other glassware, I put it in a pint glass and explained that we were running low on rocks glasses, assuming he would understand, since it was absolute chaos everywhere you looked. He took it and said, "I'm not very happy," in a smarmy way, and gave this shitty little grin. I apologized again and said, "Unfortunately we are not making any more glasses back here," and him and his wife acted like I reached across the bar and slapped him. I just got my manager and told him to deal with them. He told them the same thing I had told them regarding the lack of glassware and gave them a free drink, which they seemed happy with. I would felt bad if there was something else I could have done for them, but there wasn't, so fuck that guy. This one guy who basically hated his order so much that he waved me over and told me to put my hand out, and proceeded to spit out entirely what was in his mouth into my hand, then tell me to refund him and then make him something else. Edit. Holy guacamole. This comment blew up more than I thought. Thank you for the cake day comments and all around comments alone, and the awards. Much appreciated, fellow redditors. I'd like to point out that I was too shocked to really retaliate to what he did at that moment. I don't like confrontation, so I walked away to the bathroom and cleaned my hands for what felt like hours. My coworker saw what happened and told my boss, who kicked him out, and he was no longer allowed back. Anyways, have a great day. I have two from the same restaurant. First one goes like this. I worked as a busboy and it was getting near closing time. At this point it was around 9:30, we closed at 10, and this table, who was probably 20-ish feet away from where I was, started trying to say to me, "That's a free meal." I stopped vacuuming because I just didn't understand what they were asking me. Supposedly they were under the belief that if someone was vacuuming before close then they got a free meal. So eventually the owner comes up to me and asks me how far away I was vacuuming, and I said the same thing. She just told me, "Yeah, they're idiots," and told me to wait a little bit. They ended up leaving past 10:30, and I don't think they left a tip. They didn't get their free meal. Another shorter story was the time that two giant groups of about 16 people each came in a few weeks later at about 9:45. I think I got home at midnight that night. Back in college I was working my first job as a front of house staff for an on-campus locally owned burger place. My main job was to call the order numbers out to customers and pass their food off. Easy enough. Well, one night we get absolutely slammed with to-go orders at close. I'm the only person out at the front and there were two cooks behind me working on the food. A man ordered 2 burgers. Cool. Well, we are so busy I'm obviously not aware of what number goes with what customer off the top of my head, and I call out a number. A customer takes it and heads out. Turns out the wrong customer grabbed that man's order. He proceeded to yell profanities at me, calling me a fucking idiot, demanding his food be free and that he gets free fries, all in front of other customers. I started crying. It held up everyone else's food in the process. The manager has to tell him to fuck off and remakes his food. It was just one giant shit show. There was an old couple I loved who used to come in every single week to the restaurant I worked at. They were super nice and clearly still very much in love. I'd always kinda thought of them almost like role models of how I'd like to be in my retirement. They lived a couple of towns over in a picturesque place and would always have nice stories about what they'd been up to. The guy spoke like Ray Winston, which made him cool as fuck in my eyes. Serving them always made the shift better. Anyway, one day we were doing a charity thing for World Hunger Day, specifically for children in Africa, and there were relevant pictures of starving kids on the flyer we gave with the bill. It was one of those tick here if you want to add 25p or something things. It was a bit cringe, but most customers were like, whatever, it's only 25p. So anyway, I take over the bill and the guy totally blindsides me with his response. I ain't giving no money to some fucking CO *N. I was caught off guard and stood in silence as he went into a massive racist rant. I'd totally never expected that. I'd seen these guys as people to aspire to, and it turns out they were massive bigots. I was gutted. I worked as a server in a 24-hour diner in a small Massachusetts city. There's a prestigious school, Williston Northampton School, around the corner. Wealthy kids, almost all of them were awful. The school does this thing called button bucks. It's a prepaid card, and many of the businesses in town accept them, including the diner. Those kids treated us like we were subhuman. Snapping fingers, interrupting me while I was taking another customer's order, make a giant mess, crack jokes about us, all sorts of shitty things. Then they don't tip. I had one group of boys order about $70 worth of food, paid with a $100 bill. I brought them their change, some bills, and 13 cents in change. As they walked out the door they made a point to tell me your tip is on the table. I could tell by the way he said it that there was some shitty thing going on. They put the 13 cents in a cup full of water, napkins, ketchup, half-chewed fries, just a nasty cup they made just to be mean. The 13 cents on the bottom of the glass was my tip. That's the only time I threw a glass in the trash. I refused to degrade myself further by picking through it. It's been years and even now I feel rage just thinking about those Williston kids. Fuck the Willies. An old ex-military man around 80, he constantly tells me how pretty I'm not in the sweet grandpa way, which is fine. Many customers do that and it's sweet, but in a really slimy predatory way. He even said he'd show me how well his thing still works. He thinks he's got a right to pull this shit because he's 4 times my age. Right before quarantine hit, he had the audacity to straight up put his hand in my face while I was minding my business clearing a table. I know how ridiculous it must sound, but being a waitress for a couple of years, I can deal with stupid pickup lines or some asshole reaching for my. But with those people, you can either shut them down real quick verbally or kick them out. However, you can't just kick someone out for something as innocent as this prick does. He knows that damn well and is always right on that line where he could still defend his actions as innocent. Not necessarily the worst crime here, but there was a group of little old ladies that would come in every Sunday after church. All 4 would get the same thing every week. Iced tea and a half grilled Asian salad with a senior discount. $4.19. Every time they paid with $4 bills and 2 dimes. The tip? 4 cents. While this sucked enough on its own, the fact that they were always super sweet to everyone made it burn even more. But on top of all that, on Sunday morning/afternoon, a really busy shift, they would sit there for several hours. So on a busy day, when you only had 3 or 4 tables, having one of those tables taken for hours with a guaranteed 4-cent tip really sucked for your income for the day. Also worked at a fast food restaurant in high school. We closed at 9 on Sundays. Almost every Sunday, a group from a local church would roll in at about 8:55 and order full meals, full desserts, and then sit in the dining room until 10:30 or 11. We ended up having to make extra strong Sunday ammonia cleaner that we would use on the surrounding tables to get them to leave. As a high schooler, it was infuriating. There were plenty, but one of note was one of the guys from American Pickers. He'd been coming into our spot a lot and seemed cool. He asked me for our specialty drink with basil in it. We didn't have a drink with basil. We had a version of mojito with mint in it, and I assumed that's what he meant, but I wanted to make sure. Me, do you mean our blah blah mojito with mint? Picker slams hands down on table and stares me dead in the eye. The one with fucking basil. I got it last week. It's on the special menu. I go and ring in the mojito with mint and no fucking basil and bring it out. He takes a sip and says perfect. Fuck that junk dealer. Once I had a family of 4 come in. I work at a sushi restaurant, so of course there's the open sushi set, and logically each person gets charged for it. The dad started joking around, trying so hard to make me charge him with 2 sets instead of 4. I apologized and said I can't do anything about it. He got mad and said bitterly, some respectful staff this company has. I want to speak to the manager. and I told him there is no manager at this branch. So he laughed, like he didn't believe me. Then he said, gonna ruin your life for his. 2 days later, the AS calls me and tells me that a man came in and said that I yelled at him and that I was very disrespectful towards him and his family. I wasn't helpful or welcoming and I refused to be nice to him. I stood up for myself and told him what really happened. The AS proceeded to say I really don't know who I should believe and hung up. 2 days later, I'm fired. Former restaurateur and bar owner here. Worst customer was the assistant chef, who got drunk after closing the kitchen and tried to pick a fight with me. Actually took a swing at me. I brought him in the next day and we had a long chat about his conduct. I'll let him keep his job, provided he gave up drinking when on the premises. A couple weeks later, I showed up unexpectedly and he was at the bar drinking. The other cooks, knowing he should not be there, saw me coming through the parking lot and shuffled him off and hid him in the kitchen before I could find him drunk at the bar. I did find him, however. He was passed out, standing up, in the kitchen, leaning against the prep table. His pants were around his ankles, and he had pissed everywhere. I fired him, instantly, and as punishment, the other cooks had to stay through the night to disassemble, deep clean, and disinfect the kitchen. Best customer was the one we nearly killed. She asked if there were any mushrooms in the lasagna, and the waitress told her there were no mushrooms in the lasagna. The customer, however, didn't state she was allergic to mushrooms and the tomato sauce used in the lasagna actually did have mushrooms. Her face swelled up, and her body promptly rejected the skin from the inside of her mouth and lips, which all began peeling off in big blisters, while her breathing slowly became more difficult. Thankfully she was okay in the end, and didn't take any sort of action against us.